All right, here we go. I believe that we are live, and you'll notice that we are live on Facebook through Zoom. And this is something I wanted to try. The trade-off is that the sound is not as good on Zoom, but the advantage is that you can bring people in from all over the world. You can have guests on. And so we're going to try going on Zoom and then simultaneously doing it live on Facebook. And then we'll see how you like it. We welcome your feedback. So we're just waiting for people to join here. Now just do a little hokey Hare Krishna while I wait for people to join. And I'm basically looking on Facebook live here for the joinees. Okay. Lost our sound here. A second ago, I had sound from this. Okay, no sound. Isn't it interesting? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right, I see we have Nicholas, we have Jimmy from Minnesota, and a few other people who remain nameless. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the 9th episode of Krishna Live. And this show is going to feature, again, readings from the great Transcendental Adventure by Korma about the beginnings of Krishna consciousness in Australia. Got Bobby standing by at another Zoom terminal here. Hi, Vi. She's going to read about Haribol Sauri, who was Prabhupada's personal secretary for many years and wrote a multi-volume biography of Prabhupada called the Prabhupada Memories. And I think one of the first devotees he contacted in Australia was Vai Bobby. She gave him a bunch of magazines. So he and Vai Bobby have a history, and I thought that it would be nice if Vai Bobby could read that section and add any additional comments that came to mind. And then I'm going to read a section about the double-decker bus that we acquired in Australia. Went traveling all over doing kirtan, brought people back from the Domain Park on Sundays to the Sunday feast. And then next week we'll go to the second visit of Prabhupada to Australia. Also thanks to Jatindra for joining us on Zoom as well. We're going to start out with a medley of songs that have to... Oh, you need to mute yourself. You're going to make horrible sounds. We're going to start with a medley of songs that have to do with the soul. Right in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna, Dehi no shminyata, dehi komaram yovaram jara. As the embodied soul passes in this life from boyhood to youth and then old age, soul passes to another body at the time of death. Soul is eternal, imperishable, is not slain when the body is slain. The existence of the soul, the fact that we are not these bodies, we're spirit soul, is a foundational principle of Krishna consciousness. And so for a younger audience, and also for those of us who have older bodies but who are young in spirit, I prepared these several songs on the subject matter of the soul, and hopefully after hearing it, you'll be much more conscious this morning of the presence of the soul within this material body. And then we have a guest rapper a little bit later on, Nrsmiha Tirtha, and share with us some of his music as well. As soon as the bass or percussion comes in, we're off and running. When I look in your eyes, I see a shining soul. When I look in your eyes, I see a spirit soul. See a soul that's never born, spark and never dies, yearning to fly back home, back to the spiritual sky. From dust to come to dust to go was not spoken of the soul. This body, like a set of clothes, lives out in the soul. Flame of light and love gives light to the machine. Candle never stops, subtle, sublime, unseen. For the soul, there's no beginning, ending there's none. Small in the eye, brighter than the sun. When I look into your eyes, I see a shining soul. When I look into your eyes, I see a spirit soul. See a soul that's never born, a spark that never dies, yearning to fly back home, back to the spiritual sky. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. From the Bhagavad Gita. Jaya Devotee Devakara Mayam Dipana Vareha Ajoni Shakato Yam Parano Nahanyatani Hanyamani Sindhu Nenum Chindanti Sastani Nenum Jarati Pavara Nichayam Kodianti Opa Na Society Maritaha. The inner soul continues when the outer body ends, like flame from the wood, sparks extending, transcending dark matter, burning with the sky, invisible to the naked eye. Did you know that you can't kill, nor can you die? You can't birth, you can't fly. The soul cannot be scorched by any blaze, no water can drown the spirit, no wind can make it bear. You cannot cut another, but can it bleed? The soul is eternal, unborn, pure, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Yet howsoever turned its heart, the soul can never itself exhaust. Seated in the heart, beating strong, power never went, brighter than the sun, the soul, superior force, lives on and runs its endless course in God's unlimited universes. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As a cloud is seated on air, so spirit supports the flesh. Take away a living force, and it's just chemicals lying there, a corpse, naked and bare. Not a twitch or wiggle, not a subtle wink or giggle. Can't pickle it or puzzle with a riddle. Deaf, blind, mute, dumb, young. Can't reward it, can't ignore it, can't restore it. Deader than a doornail, stiffer than a boy. Only thing to return it, burn it, bury it. Earth, dust to dust, past passion. Infirm body versus immortal soul. Learn to give it conquer ignorance, make a spiritual choice. Sing now, give voice, rejoice. Make some noise for thy spiritual force. I say Hari, you say Krishna, Hari, Hari. I say Krishna, you say Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. I say Hari, you say Hari, Hari, Hari. I say Hari, you say Rama, Hari, Hari. I say Rama, you say Rama, Rama, Rama. I say Hari, you say Hari, Hari, Hari. Here's a few other poems to just throw in there for fun. Your birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with you, your life star hath fed elsewhere in heaven. Not in entire nakedness, nor in utter forgetfulness we come, but trailing clouds of glory from God who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing born. He beholds the light, and whence it comes, he sees it in his glory. And yet this youth who further from the east must travel still as nature's priest, and by this vision splendid is on his way of home. At length a man receives it fade away, and die in the light of coming day. Now, if you know that you're not the body, that means that you also know you're not subject to birth, death, disease, and old age. These things happen to the body, but they don't happen to the soul. The death need not be feared by the sober person who knows the difference between spirit and matter. This comes out very nicely in a poem by Alexander Pope called Grave, where is thy victory? Death, where is thy sting? Ready? Vital spark of heavenly flame, clear our purpose, mortal frame. Trembling, hoping, lingering, flying, oh, the pain of years to die. Cease fine nature, cease thy strife. Let me languish in delight. Art they whisper, angels say, sister spirit, come away. What is this absorbs me quite? Steals my senses, shuts my sight, draws my spirit, drowns my breath. Tell me, O soul, can this be death? The world recedes, it disappears. Heaven opens on my eyes, my ears, with sound, seraphic ring. Lend your wings. I mount, I fly. O grave, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead, it slumbers, the things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its throne. Dust thou comest, dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our dust and end away, but the act of each tomorrow, kindness further than today. Heart is long, time is fleeting, our heart so stoutly dead. Still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Trust no future, how the pleasant, let the dead pass, bear the death, act in the living present, heart within, God overhead. In the world can't feel the battle in the big wreck of life. Do not want tongue-driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. The lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, fallen and shipwrecked brother seen shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any faith, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Once more, those first three little songs, very quickly. Then we go to bye bye, leave it out. When I look in your eyes, I see a shining soul. When I look in your eyes, I see a spirit. I see a soul that's never born, a spark that never dies. There's a fly that home back to the spiritual sky. Dust thou art to dust return, was not spoken of the soul. This body like a set of clothes, wears out and gets exposed. A flame of light and love gives life to the routine. A candle never snuffed, subtle, sublime, unseen. Soul has no beginning, ending with none. Small and out and brighter than the sun. When I look in your eyes, I see a shining soul. When I look in your eyes, I see a pure soul. See a soul that's never born, a spark that never dies. And it's a fly back home, back to the spiritual sky. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The inner soul continues when the outer body ends like flame from which sparks ascended, transcending all matter, blending with the sky, invisible to the naked eye. You cannot kill me, can you die? You cannot burn me, can you fry? The soul cannot be scorched by any blaze, no water can drown the spirit, no wind can make it fade. You cannot cut another, nor can you breathe. Soul is eternal, unborn, a seed, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, old age, and disease. That house, however, turned across the soul can never self-exhaust, seated in the heart, beating strong, powering everyone, brighter than the sun of the soul, superior force, great while it runs its endless course, and guides on living universe. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As a cloud, seated on air, so spirit supports the flesh, take away the living force, it's just chemicals lying there, corpse, naked and bare. Not a twitch or wiggle, not a subtle wink or giggle, can't take away the composer with a wiggle. Yeah, blind, weak, dumb, numb, can't reward it, can't ignore it, can't restore it. Better than a doornail, swifter than a boy. Only thing to return it, burn it, bury it, earth to earth, dust to dust, ash to ashes. Infirm body versus immortal soul, know the difference, conquer ignorance, make a spiritual choice, sing out, give voice, rejoice, make some noise for the spiritual force. I say Hare, you say Krishna, Hare, Hare. I say Krishna, you say Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. I say Hare, you say Hare, Hare, Hare. I say Hare, you say Ram, Hare, Hare. I say Ram, you say Ram, Ram. I say Hare, you say Hare, Hare. Aham Brahmasmi, Haribol, spirit soul. Bye, Bobby. Are you ready? You need to unmute yourself first before we can hear you, and then share with us your.
Hi, you can hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Take it away.
Take it away. Okay, reading from The Great Transcendental Adventure Part 1. This is about Harry Sauri. Harry Sauri later was a servant, direct servant to Srila Prabhupada for at least 2 years, and has written some beautiful memoirs, having kept a great diary all that time. And this goes back to how he first came across Krishna consciousness. His name was Dennis Harrison, Harry to his friends. He'd taken advantage of the 10-pound passage scheme and migrated to Australia from Northern England. So in those days, if you agreed to stay at least 2 years in Australia, you got free passage, 10 pounds. And when you got there, they helped you and they kept you in a hostel, found some sort of work for you. So this was in 71 May, he arrived in Sydney by boat. Only a few days after Srila Prabhupada had departed for Calcutta. So he was there in Australia at that time in May. And that's what we talked about last meeting, how everybody was initiated and the deities were installed. And somehow Harry Sauri just missed that. Now, Harry's views on life had been recently undergoing rapid changes, symptomized by a growing interest in yoga. On his very first day in Sydney, he encountered a chanting party of devotees on a busy downtown intersection. Instantly attracted to the chanting, he stood and watched as Vaibhavi, that's me, approached with a Back to Godhead magazine and invited him to the Sunday feast. So I got the blessing of being the first devotee he met in Australia. The lights changed and Harry's friends crossed the road. Come on, Harry, let's go, they admonished. Harry gave Vaibhavi 40 cents and quickly was dragged off by his mates. While staying in a migrant hotel, Harry flicked through the Back to Godhead magazine. The multicolored front cover displayed Krishna's dancing Rasa Leela and the gopis, the cowherd damsels of Vrindavan. Everything about the magazine was attractive, but try as he could, the Sanskrit words were all alien and impossible to pronounce, and so the articles remained sort of unintelligible. Nevertheless, he kept the magazine with him. Now, Harry never made it to that feast on that Sunday. A few days later, he moved to Perth in Western Australia. After working for 6 months in a desolate mining camp in the Hamersley Ranges, Harry decided to return to Sydney. Those camps are interesting in Australia. When I first arrived in Australia, I arrived in one of those camps. I came from Singapore on an oil tanker. I got a free ride on the ship. They signed me on as a purser. But that ship was not going to any main city in Australia. It was going to one of those camps. And the system was that it was all men. They went there and they worked for months. In this case, with Harry Sauri, it was 6 months. They didn't get paid. Their money was put into a bank in the city somewhere, so they couldn't lose it gambling. There was no alcohol around. They were just working. And then when they went back after several months to the city, then they had some substantial funds that they could spend to open a business or whatever. So Harry Sauri is one of those places. And in fact, he had some funds. So when we met him, it's very interesting. Later on, somehow or other, I was doing door-to-door Sankirtan, and it was Rasarani and I. and we knocked on the door of one particular house. That was Harry Sauri opened the door. He opened the door wide with a big smile and said, "Oh, wow, been waiting for you guys, come in." And we spent 2 or 3 hours in there, him and a couple of friends of his, with the Gita explaining the philosophy. And pretty soon after that, he became a devotee, and all the funds that he'd raised, he then donated to the temple. So that was his kind of a spontaneous devotee. Let's see, reading on. So Harry returns to Sydney to find real spiritual life. Stopping in Melbourne for a 5-hour transit, Harry headed downtown and again encountered the devotees chanting in the city square to the accompaniment of the harmonium and guitar. Harry was exhilarated to meet the devotees again. Stuck, sorry. His readings of his only Back to Godhead magazine were yielding newer and newer realizations. He approached Upananda, standing on the square and holding a big stack of magazines. He asked, "Do you have anything there that tells me what is God?" Upananda was excited to meet such an enthusiastic soul and sold him the latest 3 Back to Godhead magazines, speaking to him for a few minutes and pointing out one article based on a lecture by Prabhupada that described the qualities of God. So again, spontaneous. He'd already been genuinely meditating on the Lord, trying to understand. He only had 1 magazine. Now he's going searching for the association of devotees. He comes across them again, gets more magazines, and his only question is, who is God? What about him? So Harry quickly set off to the bank of the nearby Yarra River, sat under a tree, and read the lecture carefully that Prabhupada had written. Prabhupada stressed that God was omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, and that God was a person, and his name was Krishna. Harry felt a thrill as the truth struck him. Of course, God's a person. It had never occurred to him before. Harry set off for Sydney by train that night, determined to become a devotee. So Harry Sauri was an exceptional fellow, spontaneous devotee, and we became good friends. And we were both from England. We had a similar background, and we worked together. He was the fellow who would build a lot of the things that I could design. So I would design them as an artist or an architect and do some engineering. And then Harry Sauri is the one who put it all together and made it tangible. We worked together for a long time and had a lot of achievements, construction of buildings, and then construction of the wrath carts, things like that. So are you there back, Charu?
I am here, and thank you very much for sharing that. The next segment that we read is going to be about the double-decker bus that Mohananda bought in Australia and the adventures of that. But now
that was paid for by Harry Sauri.
Yeah,
donation. Yeah,
it'll be included in the next reading.
Okay. See ya.
Thank you very much. Okay. We have Nrsmiha Tirtha, who's going to replace me here in the chair. He has a background of having written rap music. He said he sent me some stuff about 15 years ago for KHQ Radio, and it's probably on the playlist. We have 12,000 songs, and but he's here now, and because we have the Christian Lite show, I thought it'd be perfect to invite him to do a guest performance. Okay, he's relocated to Spanish Fort, Utah, with his beautiful wife Mayapur Lila and his daughter Brindavan from Gita Nagari. Okay, so let's welcome Nrsmiha Tirtha here to the Krishna Lite show. That's your music there. And the last person said the backing tracks were a little loud, so I'll lower the volume.
Thank you very
Anything
much.
you want to say about it beforehand and afterwards?
I don't know how a 70-year-old white guy can rap the way he does. I'm not as good. I'm from New York. and I should be able to do this, but I don't know if I can do it as prolific as he does it. He's something to be reckoned with. But he invited me on here, and I came on reluctantly, and I'm going to try my best. I've written some stuff, and this is one of my songs. It was actually my guru Dave inspired it. It was a half hour between work and home one night, and these words just came to me. So here we go. We'll cue it up here. I really appreciate being here in the community. You guys are great. Listen. So in the womb, you're making all kinds of promises. You don't want to feel birth pains. But when you arrive, you forget what you said, and then you're back to your old ways again. In the womb, you're making all kinds of promises. You don't want to feel birth pains. But when you arrive, you forget what you said, and then you're back. Now you're out of the gut with the umbilical cut, and your life years are your own. You take a deep breath, and then you forget all the seeds that you had sown. The many lives you had, you're no longer aware, and the repercussions you no longer care. But the one who wrote you into the book, he stands along the brook and steers like two birds sitting on a vine, one mortal and one divine. The self and the super soul inhabits the flesh. As one gets older, one stays fresh, and he tries to show you the right way to go, but you turn away cause you think you know. And when he sees it's not working from within, he sends a messenger from the other end. In the womb, you're making all kinds of promises. You don't want to feel birth pains. But when you arrive, you forget what you said, and then you're back to your old ways again. From infant to toddler, adolescent to teen, you go through the stages of life unseen, but now you're grown and you want to be known by your own identity. Peer pressure is on, but you know the truth. You do it anyway to be part of the group. You drink, smoke, do drugs and lie, but why? To be one of the guys, but it's not working out because you realize these are illicit ties. Now you're ready to cry for that name that kept you safe in the womb, and by chanting his name will keep you safe from doom, because nothing is lost, but you know the cost. Live this life for him or your life is not. Now you're ready to retire, work 20 years. Now you're ready to retire, work 20 years. Nothing to show but blood, sweat, and tears. You thought the world was different, yeah, you thought it would care, but you was just getting pimped for all those years. You can't depend on the government, cause social welfare is all spent. Now you're spending your retirement working for your food and rent. You're nursing home bound, they don't want you at home because you're messing on yourself and your memory is gone. Self-actualization is no longer an option because Maslow's laws don't apply at this junction. So while you still have breath and you can still function, renew your promises and go out with some gumption, compunction. Don't get punked, son. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the womb, you're making all kinds of promises. You don't want to feel birth pains. But when you arrive, you forget what you said, and then you're back to your old ways again. Hare Krishna.
Oh, that was it.
I'll put the real rapper back on. Here he is.
Hey, if you like that, don't forget to put something in the comment section. We want to encourage our budding Krishna rapsters here in Spanish Fork, Utah. And we're going, in case you didn't notice, through Zoom and simultaneously broadcasting on Facebook, which will allow us a platform if we want to invite other guests on in the future. The trade-off is that the sound isn't as good on Zoom as it is on Facebook Live. So give us your feedback on that as well. You just heard from Nrsmiha Tirtha, and also before that, Bobby was reading from this book, A Great Transcendental Adventure, about how Krishna consciousness got on its feet down under in Australia. Bobby and I were there from 70 to 75, so that's our story as well. Last week you heard about our having rented a storefront in a trendy area of Sydney called Paddington. Prabhupada arrived, Prabhupada installed the deities. Big crowds crowd into this long, narrow storefront on a busy municipal street. And eventually, shortly after Prabhupada came and went and installed the deities, we found that we needed a bigger place. The storefront was very popular. It was a wonderful move, but it wasn't something we could stay at because we were just bursting from the seams. So after looking around, we found a property in Glebe, which was a suburb, not at all centrally located as the Paddington property had been, but it was quite a bit of land there. There was some sheds in the back that we eventually started an incense business from, and there were some back apartments that householders could live in, and it was also very near to the University of New South Wales. So there's a paragraph here about our having moved to Glebe, and it was to Glebe that Prabhupada came when he visited Australia a second time. The devotees could no longer fit into the tiny shopfront temple at Paddington. Caru located a large cottage with a huge backyard in Hereford Street, Glebe, an old inner Sydney suburb, and the temple moved. Although it adequately housed the devotees, it did not, at least initially, generate the excitement of the Paddington temple. Whereas 120 or more guests had packed in on Sundays at Paddington, Glebe only attracted 10 or 20. But after some time, the numbers increased. So while we're at Glebe, Mohananda came from America. He'd been trained up in the Los Angeles temple. He had a lot more knowledge and experience in Krishna consciousness than any of us who had just joined locally. So one of the first things that Mohananda wanted to do was to get a bus for reasons of his own, which will become apparent as I read these sections here. In Sydney, the tall, red-headed Mohanananda had a vast reservoir of energy and enthusiasm, as well as substantial entrepreneurial skills. He and his wife Sastri had brought incredible vision and optimism to the temple, especially after as much as they had just come from the Los Angeles temple, which was the forefronter in all things new, revolutionary, and exciting in ISKCON. His ideas were endless. Some, like that of staging a Hare Krishna rock opera inspired by hair, never left the ground. Others soared. Devotees enthusiastically embraced his plans to inaugurate a traveling bus program. It would be a veritable Hare Krishna temple on wheels, he said. An old Sydney double-decker bus was soon located. It was in need of a little repair and substantial refurbishment, but the temple had no money. So here, once again, Haribol Sauri weaves his way into our narrative. Excuse me one second. We needed money, and who should have just saved up a tidy sum of money working in the mines in northern Australia? So Harry was regularly attending the Sydney Temple at Glebe, chanting Hare Krishna, doing a little service, and generally enjoying the association of the devotees. Still with long hair way past his shoulders, he was waiting for his friends to arrive back in Sydney so he could hand over his apartment to them and then move into the temple. One day he chanced to overhear a conversation between Caru and Mohanananda. The temple was 3 months arrears in rent. They'd found a suitable bus, but it would cost them $1,000 to purchase. Harry had some money in the bank that he'd saved while working in the Western Australia mining camp. He stood nearby until Caru and Mohananda noticed him. "What do you want?" asked Mohanananda, eyeing Harry suspiciously. "Well," replied Harry, "I just heard you talking about money, and I've got some money in the bank." Caru and Mohanananda's ears pricked up. "How much money?" said Mohanananda, trying to sound nonchalant. Corm is a good writer, isn't he? "Oh, about $1,500, answered Harry. Mohananda leapt in the air, shouting "Krishna" at the top of his lungs. Then he checked himself and sat down, clearing his throat. "Where is it?" he said quietly. "Oh, it's in the bank. I can bring it tomorrow if you like." "Oh, well, Caru can drive you to the bank right now." Harry assured him it was all right. "I'll bring it in the morning," he said. The next day, as promised, Harry arrived with his bank book. Caru drove him to the bank, and as he watched, Harry withdrew all of his savings and closed the account. Turning to Caru, he happily handed over the money. The bus was soon purchased. The devotees worked hard to transform it into a traveling temple. Seats were removed both upstairs and down. On the top floor, devotees laid a white pine wood floor and varnished it to a mirror finish. An altar was installed at the front and cooking facilities arranged at the rear. The lower deck was carpeted, leaving 2 seats over the back wheel arches. The windows were curtained throughout. The entire bus was repainted, the cream and saffron exterior emblazoned with the Hare Krishna movement in large lettering. Below, slightly smaller, it read, "The Positive Alternative." I'm just leafing through here. I know there's a picture of the bus in one of these photo sections here. It was a really beautiful, really gorgeous bus. Okay, anyway, Mohanananda and Charu discovered another exciting use for the bus. Devotees had been visiting the domain park regularly every Sunday since Bali, Martin, and Upendra came across it 2 years before. Now the bus started transporting whole contingents of devotees there. Each Sunday, as it pulled in behind the Sindhi Eye Hospital and parked under the giant Moreton Bay fig trees, the devotees would leap off, stormtrooper style, heralded by blasts of conch shells and billowing dense clouds of spiritual sky incense. They carried assorted paraphernalia, a giant wooden sign displaying the Maha Mantra in large letters, pictures of Prabhupada, and various colorful framed posters of Krishna mounted on boards and held head high on poles. The devotees looked exotic, the men with their shiny shaven heads, tilak and saffron cloth, and the ladies with colorful saris and basketfuls of simply wonderfuls. They chanted loudly to the accompaniment of several drums and numerous pairs of hand cymbals. As they entered the park, waving flags and banners, the large parties of devotees always attracted an instant crowd. As they chanted and danced in a circle, the crowd of onlookers swelled. The audience was mixed, young lovers arm in arm, tourists, kids licking ice cream, older people out for a stroll, whole families on a Sunday outing, and even policemen. While beer-bellied Aussie drinkers, old Bolsheviks, and tattooed hooligans yelled abuse, barefoot hippies sat grooving with the mantra. The domain was London's version of Speaker's Corner. So there were speakers. Each speaker would bring his ladder, mount the ladder, and harangue the crowds down there. When the kirtan stopped, Charu immediately climbed a stepladder and loudly addressed the crowd. Sometimes he dramatically recited stories from the Krishna book through a megaphone. His favorite was the story of Devotee the gorilla. I don't exactly remember that, but I'll take Korma's word for it. He harangued the crowd with stimulating and thought-provoking philosophy. All this, as usual, proved stiff competition for Webster. Webster was the loudest speaker of all of them there on the domain. After about an hour, the devotees would hold a roaring grand finale kirtan, and Charu would announce as loudly as possibly could to the crowd, "You're all invited back to the temple for a free love feast." The audience would cheer and whistle. "There's our bus," Charu would say, pointing to the bus. "Pile on board now, there's plenty of room. We'll drop you back here afterwards." For many, this was their first introduction to Krishna consciousness. The Reverend Dr. Ian Hunter says, "I was an Army Reserve chaplain at the time. One Sunday I was strolling about the domain with 4 or 5 colleagues when I espied the devotees chanting. After standing and watching them for a while, a devotee loudly and enthusiastically invited everyone back to the temple for the Sunday feast. People started scrambling aboard, and I can clearly remember that I too wanted to hop on the bus and go back to the temple. I almost made it, but my friends had made other plans for us for the night." For many, however, the offer was too good to refuse. Sometimes 60, 80, occasionally 100 curious and hungry guests would squeeze onto the bus and attend the burgeoning Sunday feast program at the Glebe Temple. The varied crowd, literally picked up at random, made for an interesting and often salty question time after the Sunday lecture. But most differences would evaporate over subjis, papadums, halva, sweet rice, and the crowd stopping simply wonderful. I spent 5 years, from 70 to 75, giving talks in public parks like the Domain, Sunday feasts, and morning talks, Bhagavatam class in the temple. And one thing that was very unique about Australia was it, as it says here, the questions were always salty. There were always plenty of questions during the question period, and people were never shy about asking their questions. They were quite aggressive. Many of the questions were totally outrageous, confrontational, challenging, but all that's good for a learning, budding, maturing speaker. You learn how to deal with all different kinds of um, opposition, criticisms, points of view. Pretty soon you get to anticipate the question before it's even asked. That was my training ground. That was my boot camp. Interestingly enough, after I came back to America in 1975, I noticed that the Americans are not at all like the Australians. You give a talk and you ask for questions, and they're all very docile, very reticent. It's a marked, dramatic difference between the Australians, who were a little more crude, a little more outgoing and outspoken, and that was much appreciated, and the Americans, I believe, who tend to internalize things just a little bit more. We'll continue reading this section here about the bus and then finish up with a final rap song to wind up our Krishna episode number 9. Devotees realized the greatest potential of the traveling bus program when, in early March, they used it to go up the coast of New South Wales on an inaugural trip to Brisbane, Queensland. Just a few days before a shipment of small books had arrived, devotees were excited since they had only ever distributed Back to Godhead magazines on the street before. But now they had Easy Journey to Other Planets and Krishna Consciousness, the Topmost Yoga System, both attractively presented with full color covers. Temple numbers had swelled from 12 devotees to over 30. 18 brahmacharis were free to travel in the bus. After stopping in Newcastle, the bus drove almost non-stop, arriving in Brisbane late one night. Next morning, Mohanananda took care to approach the local police to inform them of his plans. Since the Queensland's police were notorious for strictly enforcing rules governing lawful assembly, Mohanananda was decidedly low-key in his description to the officer at the desk. "We're monks from Sydney," he explained. "We'll be here for 2 or 3 days. We have these books, and we sing in the streets a bit." Miraculously, the officer thought it would not be a problem. He introduced Mohanananda to the sergeant, adding that the monks were a bit like those Hare Krishnas from Sydney and that they'd like a permit. The sergeant was equally agreeable. "Sure, no worries, mate," he said. Not only did he grant a permit, but several police cars escorted the bus downtown and arranged parking. To avoid obstructing pedestrians with the numerous book boxes, the police suggested that maybe they could help out by allowing the devotees to store their boxes of books in the boots of their police cars. For 2 days, the devotees caused a sensation in Brisbane as a large chanting party of 15 weaved its way through the downtown shopping area. The rest of the devotees sold books to the incredulous crowds who literally lined up 20 or 30 at a time to buy them. People jostled, eager to find out more. Was it a circus or a movie production? Some wondered. Harry, with his freshly shaven head, had recently moved into the temple and had worked on the bus refurbishment. He could hardly tear open the boxes quickly enough. 60 cents each, or 2 for $1, shouted Harry. As one box would empty, a devotee would run to the police car, open the boot, and take out another box, giving a nod to the constable, who would give a wink back. After 2 days, all the books were gone, and the devotees, exhilarated with their success, returned to Sydney. On their arrival, they were greeted with auspicious news. Prabhupada was coming again. Mohananda had written, expressing the devotees' eagerness to see Srila Prabhupada in Australia again. Prabhupada had reciprocated their feelings. Prabhupada wrote, "With pleasure, I have noted that you are desiring to be personally present with me again, and I am also looking forward to seeing you, all nice boys and girls, in Australia again." So next week for Krishna episode number 10, we will talk about Prabhupada's second trip to Australia. We'll finish out this evening with a number of reflections on the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God. my Lord Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, Song of the Supreme, Krishna streams to his devotee, Arjuna, the cream of all the devotees. Arjuna, the things you do every day, the gifts you give, and every tasty veggie dish, offer them to me with love and just see your soul enriched. Cup of water makes me smile, though I could drink an ocean. Flower, fruit, and leaf are fine if they're offered in devotion. Keeping me in the center, your karma will never interfere, because loving devotional service is the dharma of this spiritual atmosphere. I don't play any favorites. Everyone gets what they desire. So if someone longs for me in bhakti, oh, I'm naturally inspired. Even if you mess up a time or two, I won't make any complaint. Just rise up again, you can still shine like a saint. The undiluted souls, Mahatmas, know reality, feeling my protection. The flow of their affection goes to me. They sing my sacred names with voices sweet and stake their rightful claims at my lotus feet. I see, maintain, and shelter all. I am the seed of everything. I am everyone's best friend, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Arjuna, tell the people boldly, Krishna's devotee never dies, men and women, high and lowly. Everybody's equal in my eyes. Anybody who comes to me will never be denied. Bhakti Yoga will set you free. Just think of me, become my devotee, and you will live with me eternally. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Few verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Mahatmanas tu mam partha devim prakritamashita vedanti ananyamanado gyatva buddhiramapyam. Mama peti punarjanma dukalim asashvatam napnavanti mahatmanam samsirim paramam girim. Manmana bhavamadvata madhigi mam namaskuru mami bhaksasi satyam te pratijana priyoshime. Sarvadharman parityagya mame kam saranam vaja ham tam sarvapapibhyo mokshesi ma suchaham. Yatra Yageshwaro Krishna Yata Pasha Durudara Yata Sri Abhidupatir Dupanitir Madamama Ashi Chaitra Acharo Majudar Mamanandava Sadhariva Samantita Samya Vivasato Isa. Sri Krishna, your pure charisma, your flute playing is so intoxicating, singing your song down in Vrindavan, chanting the gopis and all the devotees, pleasing all the bhakti yogis. In a trance you dance a divine romance of Rasa Lila with Radharani. In the Bhagavad Gita, you teach us bhakti. Your divine pastimes are so sublime, they refresh the heart and fill the mind, just like the monsoon gives relief from the heat. You lifted a mountain with your little finger. You're known as the sweet butter thief, baby Gopal, the killer of Kamsa, the lover of Radha. Your complexion is dark blue, just like the ocean. I offer my devotion with all of my emotion. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Your lips are sweet, your face is sweet, your eyes are sweet, your smile is sweet. Your loving heart is sweet, your walking is sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. Your words are sweet, your personality is sweet, your garment is sweet, your posture is sweet. Your movements are sweet, your surroundings are sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. Your flute playing is sweet, your footprints are sweet, your hands are sweet, your feet are sweet. Your friendship is sweet, your dancing is sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. Your eating is sweet, your drinking is sweet. Your sleeping is sweet, your singing is sweet. Your rupa, your form is sweet. The tilak, the mark on your forehead is sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. Your deeds are sweet, your adventures are sweet, your thieving of hearts is sweet, your loving relationships are sweet, the things that are offered you are sweet, and your countenance is sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. Your garland is sweet, your necklace is sweet. The river, your river Yamuna is sweet, her rippling waves are sweet, her waters taste sweet, her lotus flowers are sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. The gopis, your cowherd girlfriends are sweet, your leelas and pastimes are sweet. Your meetups are sweet, your conquests are sweet, your sidelong glances are sweet, your manners are sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. The gopas, your cowherd boyfriends are sweet. The cows are sweet, your walking stick is sweet, your unlimited creation is sweet. Your sidelong glances are sweet and your manners are sweet. Everything is completely sweet without the Lord of sweetness. Maradam, 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 nayanam, maradam, asaram, maradam, ririyam, maradam, gamaram, maradam, maradari katearakaram, maradam, pacharam, maradam, charitam, maradam, basaram, maradam, bramitam, maradam, charitam, maradam, bramitam, maradam, maradayari katearakaram, maradam, Reno marado, panimara, paro maradam, netam maradam, sakam maradam, maradari katearakaram, maradam, Pitam maradam, bhaktam maradam, saptam maradam, rupam maradam, tilakam maradam, maradari patearakaram maradam, gopi marada, lila marada, yoktam maradam, muktam maradam, sistam maradam, maradari patearakaram maradam, gopa marada, gogo maradam, yastir maradam, sistir maradam, dalitam maradam, maradari patearakaram maradam. Those were 8 verses written by Balamacharya, obviously about the sweetness of Krishna. And these are some verses from the Opulence, the Absolute, the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, translated into verse. No truth exists besides myself. Do not be misled. Everything is strung on me as pearls on a thread. I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon. I am the syllable Om. I am the strength of the strong. I am the fragrance of the earth. I'm the forest fire bright red. I'm the blazing sunset. I'm the alphabet from A to Z. I'm the seed of everything. From me all things arise. I'm the faith of the great men. I'm the wisdom of the wise. The vigor of the strong I am. Not triggered by greed or lust. The sex life comes from me when it's righteous, pure, and just. I am the sacred Vishnu. Of all sorts of lights, I am the sun, stars, and moon at night. I am the Paramatma, dwelling in everyone's heart. I am the life of all that live. I am the ending, beginning, and start. The Himalayan mountains, unshakable, unbreakable, indicate me. I am the unlimited, eternal ocean. Of vegetation, I am the banyan tree. Of hymns, I am Godfrey. Of seasons, I'm spring. Months, I am November, the time of peace and harvesting. I am Kandharpa, god of love, like Cupid with his bow. Of cows I am Sarabi, who gives milk in limitless flow. Of beasts I am the lion, of conquerors I am time. Of rivers I am the Ganges, flowing liquid and sublime. Of weapons I am the thunderbolt. Of men I am the king. I am Yama, the lord of death, who judges everything. I am the wind that separates flesh from the soul. I am logic, clear, concise. I am all devouring death. But all this is but a tiny indication. There is no limit to my manifestations. Every glorious and wonderful creation springs from but a spark of my radiation. What need to go on, Arjuna, with a more exhaustive list? A tiny spark of me pervades all that exists. Since I create the dual worlds of spirit and flesh, the wise prioritize my service, keeping their hearts forever fresh. My devotees always think of me, following me all the time, discussing me incessantly. I am always theirs and they are mine. Because they serve with love and never swerve aside, from within their hearts I cause ignorance to subside. The wattage of knowledge I shine from within so bright. Deep parental affection, guide them to the light. No truth exists besides myself. Do not be misled. Everything is strung on me, as pearls are strung on a thread. Mata paratanam yana kinchirastina sutre mayegaram sutre manayeganeva aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam prabhajate iti mata bhajanti ma buddha sama savanditaham. In the Bhagavad Gita song of the Supreme Krishna streams to his devotee Arjuna the cream. Arjuna, the things you do every day, the gifts you give, and every taste of every dish, offer them to me with love and see your soul enriched. A cup of water makes me smile, though I could drink an ocean of flower, fruit, and leaf are fine, if they're offered in devotion. I don't play any favorites, everyone gets what they desire. If someone longs for me in bhakti, I'm naturally inspired. Even if you mess up a time or two, I won't make any complaint. Just rise up again, you can still shine like a saint. The undiluted souls, Mahatmas, know reality, and feeling my protection, their affection flows to me. They sing my sacred names with voices sweet and stake their rightful claims at my lotus feet. I see, maintain, and shelter all. I am the seed of everything. I'm the beginning, middle, and end. I'm everyone's best friend. Arjuna, tell the people boldly, my devotee never dies, men and women, high and lowly. Everybody's equal in my eye. Anybody who comes to me will never be denied. Bhakti Yoga will set you free. Success is guaranteed. Think of me, become my devotee, and you will live with me eternally. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna, your pure charisma, your flute playing is so intoxicating, singing your song down in Vrindavan, pleasing the gopis and all the devotees, and chanting the bhakti yogis. In a trance you dance the divine romance of Rasa Leela with Radharani. Your divine pastimes are so sublime, they purify the heart, give relief to the mind. You lifted a mountain with your little finger, you're the sweet butter teeth known as baby Gopal, the killer of Kamsa, the lover of Radha. Your complexion is dark blue like the ocean, I offer you my devotion with all of my emotion. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So that concludes Krishna Lite Show, episode number 9. We did a rap song to start things off about the soul. We invited Nrsmiha Tirtha to make a guest appearance with his own original rap composition. Bhai Bobby reminisced about how it was that Haribol Sauri, who eventually became Prabhupada's servant and wrote an extensive biography of Prabhupada, came to the Krishna conscious movement. And I also read a section where Haribol Sauri donated his savings so we could buy a double-decker bus and bring people back to the Sunday feast from the domain. And also we talked about a trip up to Brisbane and Queensland with 15 brahmacharis in the bus, during which we sold all of the books that we had, and the police helped us out by storing the books in the trunks of their cars. And then we finished up with some rap music about the Bhagavad Gita, the universal form. And we also included in that the Madhura Stakam, 8 verses on the sweetness of Krishna by Vallabhacharya. That concludes our segment today. We did something different today. We broadcast on Zoom and then shared it on Facebook. The sound probably wasn't as good today, especially for the music. That's just the nature of Zoom, the nature of the beast. But it does allow for us to invite other people from other parts of the world to come in and share their original music with us. We invite your feedback and your comments about that. And in the meantime, we will see you a week from now, 1 o'clock on Sundays for the 10th episode of the Krishna Lite Show. This afternoon, we have our Sunday feast, and included in the Sunday feast are what I call the Chant for Change motivational talks. Tonight, the talk will be the antidote for death. Thanks very much, as always, for joining us. I see Thomas was with us, and Guru Charan Singh, and Govinda Dev, Maheshwari, as well as a number of other people. So grateful to you for taking time on your weekend to join us, to rap with us, to reminisce with us. And we look forward to being with you again, either this evening or during our Bhagavatam classes, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning at 7:30, or perhaps next week for the 10th episode of the Krishna Lite Show. Taking your leave, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.